I want to talk about the nun and the monk in the general prologue as fine examples of Chaucer's very careful, very subtle, nuanced irony, which I would argue has at least three levels. The first one is obvious. It's that faux naive, wide-eyed, fake wonderment with which the narrator, the Chaucer, who's a character in the story, praises all of his wonderful new friends. I met these 29 pilgrims, and aren't they all so wonderful? Golly. Then there's the second level, which is accessible to just about all of us, whereby we understand that, like, Chaucer is, of course, subtly and devastatingly criticizing these people for their various shortcomings, their folly, and their moral shortcomings, especially characters who are falling short of commonly held Christian values. The the nun, the priest, and the friar are all prosperous. They're all prosperous religious officials. And that's the problem. They are prosperous. They're not supposed to be. They are all from religious orders which took vows of poverty and chastity. Poverty and chastity. Now, sexual continence is a general Christian value and a value of most world religions. Poverty is an expressed Christian value. We're not even making fun of these people for being too caught up in worldly expense and money for a general Christian. They're officially vowed to poverty, and somehow they're rich. They are, in various ways, establishment religious figures who are totally adrift from the values their position and their church is meant to promote. They're not the only the actual religious members, the actual members of clergy aren't the only ones. The other pilgrims can be equally bad. They're all on pilgrimage, so they all are interested in Christianity. They all fall short. The wife of Bath is very proud because of her social prominence. She gets to go, she'll walk in church in front of all the other ladies before a ceremony, but if she's not first in line, she flies into a rage. Flying into a rage in church is not taught by Christianity or indeed any religion. It's not a value any religion has ever set out to promote, right? She's not being a good Christian, but she really likes going first in church. And that's the kind of Chaucer irony right there. They're not down with the values, they want the social prominence. Let's talk about the prioress, one of the high status figures here, who comes in order after the night. There's an initial plan where Chaucer's narrative is going to describe them each in order of their social class, from the knight who's on top, and his entourage, his son, and his servant, moving on down. That breaks up. He doesn't do it in proper order. He asks forgiveness for not doing it in proper order, as if he was doing this orally, just talking and not deliberately writing it. But before that breaks down, the prioress comes second. She's a high-ranking nun, either second in command of a nunnery, of a major nunnery, or number one at a small nunnery. And she is dressed in a fabulous way. We hear an enormous amount about her table manners. We hear a lot about her clothes. We hear about, like, her little the fact that she doesn't get any grease in the cup when she drinks out of it. This is still an era of shared utensils and shared drinking cups. We hear a lot about how she simpers and is coy, she's well dressed, she's pretty, maybe, and then that sly Chaucer irony talks about how broad her forehead was. Maybe that's because the broad forehead was in fashion. We can point to medieval paintings. Or maybe it's a hand's breadth broad, maybe that's a little broad. Again, it's the ironic praise that brings you down. He also brings her down. There's that great moment where he talks about she spoke the French of Stratford at Boa, of Stratford at the Bow, i.e., of a small, not particularly famous place in England, the French of, like, wherever in England. The French of Paris was to her a Noah, unknown. She speaks, it's like she speaks the French of Pepper Pike, Ohio. I'm not going to single out Pepper Pike, Ohio. She speaks the French of, let's say Painesville. Having got two places, you can't be from both of them. Um, look, I speak the French of Lawrence, Massachusetts. That accent is quel funke, but it's certainly not the Parisian accent. Okay, so we're bringing her down in those ways, but also we talk about how wonderfully kind and generous she is, but she's mostly generous to her little dogs or to mice that are trapped. She is supposed to be caring for the poor, poor humans. She's supposed to be following the Christian message to fight the concentration of wealth and power and take care of the poor, to be on the side of the poor. Instead, we have her, as a sign of her deep Christian charity, we have her affection for her little dogs, her smallest hundes, her little dogs, and how she feeds them with roasted flesh, milk, and wastrel bread. They get milk, they get white bread, which is expensive and rare. Yeah, we get white bread, we get Wonder Bread at the supermarket, and it's the cheapest option. White bread in this period is extremely hard. It's hard to keep it from being brown. It's an upper class thing, and roasted meat is not something people get to eat every day or necessarily every week. So we have a nun who's got her little lap dogs or purse dogs, and she's feeding them on extremely expensive food. This is not a Christian sister. This is a 14th century Kardashian sister. And that's how she rolls. The nice clothes, the nice little manners, no interest in the poor. She's acting like she's a member of the upper class. She might actually have been born in the upper class and just has been moved into the nunnery as part of a strategy of keeping wealth and power while her older sisters get married off. Or she's someone who's risen up to be high enough in her order to have the privileges that go with wealth and power. She is she's a tricked out nun with the fancy clothes who's not interested in the Christian mission in any way. She's not interested in poverty. She's wasting extremely expensive food on her dogs. It's like giving the little dog from like Clueless or whatever caviar and roasted venison. It's incredibly wasteful. It's offensively wasteful. And Chaucer lets you conclude that on her own. And also point the end of the description of the nun describes her coral rosary beads. Rosary beads then and now in the Catholic Church are prayer beads, and you go through and you pray bead by bead. Now she has coral rosary beads. Her rosary beads have been jeweled, and there are some people still who do that kind of thing as an expression of putting monetary value where the spiritual value is. First of all, I think it's a little tricky. Okay, we've got somebody taking a vow of poverty, and she's got this incredibly expensive jewel prayer beads. It's maybe more about the jewelry than about the religious practice. In fact, she's turned her prayer beads into a form of bling. But more than that, off that she's got a piece of secular jewelry, a brooch with the crowned A and the words amor vincit or vincit omnia, Latin for love conquers all. Is that a Christian position? Does she mean Jesus' love? No. Latin has many words, has more than one word for love. Amor is not what you're supposed to do to your neighbor. If you want to amor your neighbor, you better have permission, right? The police might come. That is, she has attached to her blinged out rosary beads a piece of jewelry that says love conquers all, that's about having romantic love affairs. This is a woman who's taken a vow of chastity, who's supposed to be married to God. But instead, she's having totally secular lovers. She's, well, Sister Kardashian. This is nowhere close to what she's supposed to be doing, and that's on that damning specific detail. That's where the description ends. We say, oh yeah, she has some other nuns and a priest. We move to the monk, who is an outrider who loves venery. Venery means hunting, but also it's also it is the word now. It has that suggestion of sexual. It has a suggestion of sexuality. Venery now has a sexual connotation, and I don't think that connotation isn't there either. This is a man who loves being in his body. You can hear him. You can hear this monk coming because there are bells on his horse jingling as he rides. He has pimped his ride. He has also taken a vow of poverty, and he's supposed to be like a monk inside a monastery, but he's not. He's out there in the world. Some people were licensed to go out in the world and do the monastery's business, but this monk is taking care of a lot of personal business. He's got very expensive horses. He's got very expensive greyhounds. Greyhounds as fast as birds. We may think of hunting as a blue-collar Joe six-pack pastime, and in 21st century America, it often is. The kind of hunting we're talking about in the 14th century is reserved for the wealthy. It needs a lot of set-aside land. Mostly it needs very expensive horses and dogs. He's got an incredibly expensive horse. It's like he's got an SUV or a Ferrari, except it has 4 hooves. He's got these incredibly expensive dogs. His monk's robe has expensive fur lining inside the sleeves. He's as far from the spiritual virtues he's supposed to be pursuing as he could possibly be. He's nowhere close. And the Chaucer narrator is all for, like, yeah, that's right. Why should a monk be hanging out and doing, like, what about all this? And we start quoting the rules of saints who founded monastic orders about what monks are supposed to be doing, which is not at all what Chaucer's monk is doing. And Chaucer's just like, yeah, why would you do that? Why would you be inside all day in a monastery, in a cloister? That text he counted not worth an oyster. And here's where we get to the third level of irony. Now, in one level, and the friar very much gets the same treatment, is the same kind of character. We have the naive Chaucer narrator who's like, aren't these people great? And then we have that second level of irony that he allows us to, like, oh my God, they're so corrupt. And it's really good. He's really good at selling it with the specific storytelling details. The fur inside the sleeves, the coral rosary beads, the little Amor Vincent Omnia brooch hanging off the rosary beads. And to hear, like, yes, this is not how it's ought to be. This is satire. We're bringing these people down. We are mocking them for their intellectual, but also their moral and spiritual failings. But there's a third level too. On some level, when the Chaucer narrator says, isn't it great? It's because Chaucer himself implies he understands. On some level, that ironic, isn't it? Yeah, why would you hang out? Why would you hang around inside why would you hang around a monastery when you could be out hunting with expensive horses and dogs? That sounds like so much more fun. There's part of him that recognizes that, yes, I would rather do that too. I don't want to be a monk. I would rather be out hunting. I would rather have the pimped out stallion with the jingling bells. Does Sister Eglantine have love affairs? Well, like, I can imagine, like, wanting to be in love. These are sins. These are failings, but these aren't murderers. These are human failings that Chaucer is laughing at, but also understanding and inviting us to understand it. So this is corruption. And the second level is, yeah, that's corrupt, that's dirty, they're falling short, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. But there's also a sense of, like, yeah, this is corruption because we're human and we're flawed, and the joke is on all of us in the end. Yeah, they're all falling short. But you know what? I totally get it. They're weak in pretty much the way I'm weak. And with that, we get not simply a double, but a triple vision of all these characters, which is part of what leads to the enormous literary richness of this poem.